Have you ever wondered, what does a man who lived for 930 years say to his family when he's dying? Adam wasn't just the first human, he was also the only person who had seen paradise. Tonight, we'll listen to those final words where he shared his memories of Eden, his deepest regrets, and his last message to future generations. As you settle in tonight, imagine a scene unlike any other in human history. In a simple dwelling, surrounded by children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and descendants stretching back through 9 centuries, lies an old man whose eyes have seen more than any human before or since. This is Adam, not the young man who walked with God in the cool of Eden, but an ancient patriarch whose weathered hands have worked the cursed ground for nearly a millennium. His hair, white as snow, frames a face marked by both sorrow and wisdom. His body, once perfect, now bears the weight of all those years, all those memories, all those regrets. But tonight is different. Adam knows his time has come. After 930 years, longer than any empire has lasted, longer than most languages have existed, the first human is preparing to take his final breath. And gathered around his bedside are those who love him most, waiting for his last words. What do you say when you've lived longer than anyone ever will again? How do you summarize nearly a millennium of life? What wisdom do you pass on when you're the only person who remembers what perfect paradise was like? Tonight, we'll explore what those final moments might have been like. We'll imagine the words that could have been spoken, the memories that might have been shared, the legacy that was certainly left behind. These weren't just the last words of a dying man, they were the final testimony of humanity's beginning, the bridge between paradise lost and paradise promised. Come with me to that bedside, and listen to the voice of the man who knew both the deepest fall and the most enduring hope. The room was crowded, filled with more family than most people could imagine. Adam's children, those who were still living after centuries of life, sat closest to his bed. Seth, now over 800 years old himself, held his father's weathered hand. Behind him stood great-grandchildren who were themselves ancient by our standards, and behind them, descendants whose family tree stretched back through nearly 1,000 years. This wasn't just a family gathering, it was a meeting of the entire human race. Every person alive could trace their lineage directly back to this man lying before them. Every breath taken in that room came from lungs descended from the first breath God had given to Adam in Eden. The atmosphere was heavy with anticipation and grief. They all knew that when Adam died, they would lose not just a father and grandfather, but the last living connection to the world before sin, the only person who could remember what God had originally intended for humanity. Adam's eyes, though dimmed by age, still held a spark of the intelligence that had once named every animal in Eden. His voice, though weakened, still carried the authority of one who had walked with the Creator. As he looked around the room at the faces of his descendants, you could see both pride and sorrow in his expression, pride in the family that had grown from him and Eve, sorrow for the world he was leaving them to inherit. "Come closer," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the soft breathing of the gathered crowd. "I need to tell you things you must never forget. I need to give you words that must be passed down through every generation until God makes all things new again." The room grew even quieter as everyone pressed closer, straining to hear what might be the most important words ever spoken by human lips. Adam's eyes closed for a moment, and when he spoke, it was as if he was seeing something far beyond the walls of that simple room. "I want to tell you about the garden," he began, his voice growing stronger as the memories flowed. "I want you to know what God intended for us, what we lost, and what He has promised to restore." He spoke of mornings in Eden when he would wake to the gentle singing of birds whose voices had never known fear. He described how the air itself seemed alive with joy, how every breath brought not just oxygen but somehow the very presence of God into his lungs. "The trees," he whispered, "you cannot imagine the trees. Every leaf was perfect, every fruit was beyond anything you could dream of tasting. And in the center stood 2 trees that changed everything, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil." The room was completely silent now, hanging on every word. These weren't just stories to them, this was their history, their heritage. "I chose poorly," he said simply. "Your mother and I, we chose to trust our own wisdom over God's, and that choice changed everything. But listen carefully, that choice was ours alone. You are not condemned by what we did. You have your own choices to make." As Adam spoke about his failure in Eden, the pain in his voice was unmistakable. This wasn't just regret. This was the anguish of someone who knew that his decision had affected every human who would ever live. "The moment we ate that fruit, everything changed," he said, tears in his ancient eyes. "The animals that had been our friends suddenly feared us. The ground that had freely given its abundance suddenly resisted our efforts. Our bodies that had never known pain became fragile and mortal. He paused, struggling with emotions that 9 centuries had not diminished. But worse than all of that was the silence. God had walked with us every evening. His voice was the most beautiful sound in creation. And then, after we sinned, the silence was so complete it was like death itself. But then Adam's expression changed, and hope flickered in his eyes. Yet even in that moment of judgment, God showed us mercy. He made clothes to cover us. He promised that one day, someone would come who would crush the serpent's head. He gave us work, family, the chance to know him again. Adam's voice grew stronger. I have spent 930 years learning that our God is not just holy, he is incredibly merciful. Every sunrise, every child born, every moment of love, these are gifts from the same God we disappointed in Eden. As the night deepened, Adam began to share wisdom that only someone who had lived for nearly a millennium could possess. His words carried the weight of experience spanning generations. I have watched many of you being born and many die, he said. I have seen love create families and hatred destroy them. Through it all, I have learned things you must remember. He spoke about work, drawing from centuries of tilling the cursed ground. The ground may resist you, but it will reward honest effort. I have seen crops fail and flourish, and both taught me that we must work with hope but trust in God for results. Adam shared insights about relationships from 9 centuries of marriage to Eve. Love is not a feeling that comes and goes. Love is a choice you make every day, especially when you don't feel like making it. Your mother and I made that choice for over 900 years. Love is the closest thing to Eden we can still experience. He spoke about parenting with the authority of being father to the entire human race. Every child is a gift from God, but they are not possessions to control. They are souls to guide, hearts to protect, minds to teach. You cannot make their choices, I learned that with Cain and Abel. But you can show them what choices lead to life. Most importantly, Adam spoke about hope. I have lived long enough to see how God keeps his promises, even when it takes longer than we expect. The promise is still being fulfilled, even if we cannot see its completion. As Adam felt his strength ebbing, he spoke about the one experience his 930 years had not yet brought him, death itself. I find myself curious about what comes next, he said softly. In Eden, we were created to live forever. Death was never part of God's original plan. So what I'm about to experience is as unknown to me as anything has ever been. But there was no fear in his voice, only profound trust built through nearly 10 centuries of walking with God. Yet I am not afraid. The same God who breathed life into clay to create me will receive that breath back when I die. The same hands that formed me with care will welcome me home. Adam spoke about God's character learned through the centuries. I have seen his faithfulness in every season. I have felt his comfort in grief. I have experienced his forgiveness for countless failures. This same God will not abandon me when I need him most. He shared his belief that death, while a consequence of sin, was also mysteriously a mercy. If we had eaten from the tree of life after our fall, we would have been trapped forever in our broken state. Death gives us the possibility of something beyond this brokenness. I believe when I close my eyes for the last time in this world, I will open them to see my Creator's face again. Adam's gaze moved to his sons and daughters, his voice carrying urgent love despite his weakness. My children, he said, I have seen what happens when people forget who they are and who they serve. I watched Cain let jealousy consume him until it led to murder. Learn from what I have witnessed. He spoke about leadership and responsibility. God has given you strength and authority, but these are gifts for service, not domination. The strongest person is one who protects the weak. The wisest is one who listens before speaking. Adam shared insights about work that could only come from someone who had helped establish human civilization. Whatever work God gives you, do it with excellence. Whether you tend flocks or work the ground, remember that you are partnering with God in caring for his creation. To the women, his voice held special tenderness. To you, daughters of Eve, you are precious to God and to us. When God created your mother, he said it was not good for man to be alone. You were the completion of his design for humanity. You bear God's image just as fully as any man does. He spoke prophetically about women's role in redemption. The promise God made was about the woman's offspring who would crush the serpent's head. The hope of the world will come through you. Cherish that calling and trust that God sees your faithfulness. As his voice grew weaker, Adam's thoughts returned to God's promise and his final charge to his descendants. In our darkest moment, he whispered, when God explained the consequences of our choice, he also gave us a promise. He said the woman's offspring would crush the serpent's head. I have thought about those words every day for 930 years. Adam spoke of watching for this promise's fulfillment in each generation. I will not live to see the serpent's head crushed, but I believe someone will. I will not see paradise restored, but I believe it will be. The same God who promised redemption has never stopped working toward it. With his remaining strength, Adam wanted to share what he had learned about God's character through 9 centuries of relationship. I want you to know your God. He is loving, patient, faithful, and kind beyond what words can express. He is perfectly good and trustworthy. His patience is not weakness, it is strength choosing to love rather than judge. Adam felt urgency as he prepared to pass on essential knowledge. You must remember these things. Tell your children, and they must tell their children. Do not let the truth be lost. Tell them about Eden, so they will know what God intended. Tell them about our failure, so they will understand why the world is broken. Tell them about God's mercy, so they will know brokenness is not the end. Never stop believing that the serpent's head will be crushed. Never stop looking for the one who will make all things new. You are created in God's image, live like the royal children you are. As the dawn light began to filter through the windows of that simple dwelling, Adam's breathing became more labored. The family gathered even closer, knowing that the moment they had both dreaded and prepared for was finally arriving. With his last reserves of strength, Adam spoke his final words. His voice was barely a whisper, but in the perfect silence of the room, every syllable was heard clearly. I go now to see what eye has not seen and ear has not heard, he whispered. I go to discover what God has prepared for those who love him. I go to learn whether the hope that has sustained me for 930 years was placed in me by the God of truth. He paused, gathering strength for his final sentences. Remember me not as the man who brought sin into the world, but as the man who learned that God's love is stronger than human failure. Remember me not as the one who lost paradise, but as the one who never stopped believing that paradise could be regained. Adam's eyes moved one last time around the room, taking in the faces of his beloved family. I have lived to see many generations, but the generation I most want to see is the one that will witness the fulfillment of God's promise. That generation may be yours, or it may be your children's children's children. But it will come. Hold fast to that hope. With his very last breath, Adam whispered words that would echo through human history. The Lord gives, and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And then, peacefully, with his family surrounding him and his faith intact, Adam closed his eyes for the final time. The first human being, who had lived longer than any person ever would again, had completed his earthly journey. As you rest tonight, remember that Adam's story is also your story. You are part of the family that surrounded his deathbed, part of the human race that carries his legacy, part of the hope that sustained him through 930 years of life outside of Eden. The words he might have spoken on his deathbed, words of regret and hope, of warning and promise, of love and faith, these are words that still echo through human hearts today. Every person who has ever struggled with the consequences of poor choices, everyone who has ever longed for paradise lost, everyone who has ever hoped for redemption and restoration, all are connected to that first man whose final breath marked the end of an era and the continuation of a promise. Adam's faith that the serpent's head would one day be crushed was not misplaced. His belief that paradise would be restored was not naive. His trust that God's love is stronger than human failure was not foolish. Time has proven him right on all counts. Tonight, as you close your eyes, you can rest in the same hope that sustained Adam through 9 centuries of life. The same God who walked with him in Eden and sustained him outside of Eden is the same God who loves you, provides for you, and has prepared a place for you in the restored paradise that Adam longed to see. You may not live for 930 years, but you can live with the same trust that carried Adam through his incredibly long life. You can face your own mortality with the same peace that marked his final moments. You can leave your own legacy of faith and hope for the generations that will follow you. The promise that comforted Adam on his deathbed, the promise of the woman's offspring who would crush the serpent's head, has been fulfilled. Paradise has been made accessible again. The way back to Eden has been opened. What Adam could only hope for, you can experience as reality. Sleep peacefully tonight, beloved child of Adam. You are part of a story that began in a garden, continued through 930 years of faithful living, and will end in a city where God dwells with his people forever. The same hope that sustained the first human will sustain you, and the same God who received Adam's final breath will be with you in all your days. Sweet dreams, heir of Adam, child of promise, citizen of the kingdom that will never end. Good night, And may you rest knowing that the hope Adam carried for 930 years has been fulfilled in you. Asterisk.